It's a common story, one too many have told from other sides of town, a common thread. Same ask, different packaging. It's the need to be accepted, the need to be represented.
Community is not homogeneous, as we always say. We are very diverse. They don't want outsiders to speak at us. We want them to speak to us. We don't want to be treated as special beings in adults. We want to be treated as part of the conversation. So how do we do this? And that's why we come together and we bring our network of focus groups who look at your content, who look at your script, who look in detail to advise you. Agencies are nervous or brands are nervous to tread the path of being diverse or focusing on specific markets because of their lack of understanding, because of their lack of insight. Now, this is why we're here to partner you. Our aim is not to create an exclusive content that will speak to a particular group of people, but we just want you to be mindful that if you attempt to include us, then do it right.
It's going to take time, okay? And it's going to take time to go beyond people who are like me, who essentially come from the same academic and professional gene pool. People who really will bring a totally different perspective. What do you do in the meantime while you're systemically changing your industry? You bring in consultants. You bring in people whom you can embed within your existing teams. So let's say you've got a fantastic team at your ad agency, but you just want them to get a better perspective on DEI. We'll hire somebody and embed them into that team. Get a consultant in who actually looks at the storyboard on day one. And that, for me, is the short-term win that we need to do.
Well, who decides whether something is stereotyped or not? Who decides? What community, what panel, what group? And actually it's the council, it's the Advertising and Standards Authority Council, who of course have their, let's say, token representation of the odd individual. But that individual just isn't everyone. I think the thing is, it's interesting because the conversation is more interesting to brands that are global, that think global, because the global world looks very different from the regional world that we live in the country. The brands that are much more kind of London focused are also more interested in getting it right. But I think the most interesting overall is that actually the biggest change and the reason for change is actually the money, which is what makes people change things quickest. Right. Is changing before the marketing departments are. And I think that's why a lot of marketing departments are saying, we've got to do things differently, but they don't necessarily know how to. The truth is they've got to employ people like yourselves, but they've ultimately got to change their teams because it's too hard as a team when you look around and everyone is the same to naturally think differently, be instinctive about how you think.
I guess this is why communities are so important, because it feeds the very essence of who we are, keeps us rooted. Now, would you believe me if I told you there are spaces where glass ceilings find haven, where boardrooms look like stars, visible but beyond reach, where lack of diversity makes way to cheapen your daring, where broad generalizations are the new token, where ads add everything but positive representation? This is the United Kingdom. Here lives the streets we walk, the floors we sweep, the blocks we live, the buildings we sometimes occupy, land of opportunity, home of the high-rise, house of the elites. The streets never sleep. Silence is never loud, and a story unwritten never is. Instead, it beckons for a time where stereotypes no longer weave the narrative, where progress no longer requires protest, where kids find solace in the hope that their dreams don't have glass ceilings.
Especially since Black Lives Matter, we're seeing a lot more diversity of representation in advertising. The ads are all tokening, aren't they? So it is catching up. And to be fair, I know they're trying to catch up in terms of diversity in employment as well. I've been struck by how slow the process has been, both culturally, internally, but also in terms of its business model. I think it's a bit stuck in old school ways of doing business. And when I was in advertising, it was so creative and so fun. And now it seems to be always fishing in the same pool of ideas. And I think that might be because it's fishing in the same pool of people and experience. If you think of the cultural impact of non-white people in the world is enormous. We need to allow them to impact the advertising industry as well.
Advertising agencies don't reflect the audience they serve. Why is that? I think it's partly because people, and I get this, they recruit people in their own image, and that's fine. But ultimately, it's not working because you have to have people that challenge you. People that say, maybe don't look like you, maybe their hair's different. We've got to challenge ourselves. Nothing surprises me more. People say to me, oh, I'd have loved for a black person to have applied for the job, but they didn't, no one applied. Well, of course they didn't apply because you went through the same recruitment process, you used the same recruitment wording. It doesn't work. When I joined Eagle, suddenly I realized a lot more closely and a lot more clearly how a latent prejudice exists. People said, oh yeah, great, come on over. But it was interesting that there's a sort of shock still because we don't have all black film crews. It doesn't happen. And that's been one of the marvelous things about working with Eagle, just how much we've enjoyed that process of exposing people to new cultures and so on.
What I do is, in terms of, I'm going to say, as a creative approach to everything that we do, is we try and do the best image and identity that we feel will work for the client. So don't push an agenda that isn't going to work, push an agenda that's right for the brief. And that's what we've been doing. And a little bit like Mark said, when certain people walk into a room, you get a little bit of an edge about what's that about. 5 minutes later, hey, that looks amazing, that's great. And we showed by example. The positive thing that comes out of that is we put the first black model into an outdoors campaign in Europe that had ever existed. Now, 3 to 4 years later, it's ubiquitous. And what I'm very proud of is that we didn't see color. We saw talent and we saw diversity and we saw how society was, because that's how we live.
Remember me, when green lights are red, without a word said, without a soul lost. See me, even if it costs, because it pays to have a truly diverse workforce. I hope that one day, the world will mirror me, reflect me authentically. Remember me.
Wow. Thank you very much for doing that.
I'm thinking about it just in the very simple term of, oh, why should I target more blacks than whites? As a business, I would really expect you to thinking, how can I ensure that we are making the profits, as much profit as we can, right? If you want to make as much profit as you can, you then need to think wider in your communication, your marketing, your advertising, getting all of those different consumers, because actually maybe the things that I like to buy and experience are the things that my white colleagues like to buy and experience, but you're missing me out. And there's there's lots of research about the power of the Black British pound. Yeah, a lot of people just use this, especially if you live in London, is to open your front door, you will see that everyone walking past isn't just like you. So how can we create that community where we all feel like we belong, all feel like, do you know what? I love this brand because they're doing X, Y, and Z. And that's really the job of a marketeer. That's the job of a comms person, is to do that.